Coffee is a big part of my day. Not only does it help me get through the morning, but I just really love the taste of good quality beans. Trade is a subscription service that brings great coffee from indie roasters all over the country right to your door. Tell Trade what you typically like, whether it's espresso or single origins or even decaf, even how you like to make your coffee, and they will recommend the right beans for you. Or you can just choose from over 450 different coffees. Then you select how often you'd like the coffee delivered to you. Shipping is always free, by the way. And if you need to skip a week or so, just do that. You can do it. No charge at all. Then pick back up when you're ready to get beans delivered to your door again. Go to unitedwedrink.com/trade to get started with Trade today and start getting some of the best coffees in the country delivered to your door. That's unitedwedrink.com/trade. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, coworkers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the last episode of 2023 of the United We Drink podcast, right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich. I am in celebration mode. That means that I'm not celebrating anything. I'm just drinking celebration because 'tis the season. And with me, as always, is a man who I believe is a religious advocate for the celebration season as well. I don't know if he's drinking it tonight, but Kevin Abbott is definitely a brother in arms.
Mike, it is an honor and a privilege to be here with you this evening. I am full of pizza and beer. I just got back from Civil Society's brewery in Jupiter, where my brother-in-law, Brad, has installed a kitchen, and I was involved in a friends and family night and had like one piece of 12 different pizzas, wings, mac and cheese. I indulged my face off. I had some good beer, had a really good black IPA from Civil Society, which I just said really good. So yes, I really, really enjoyed it. I even tried to buy a 4-pack and they didn't have the register open because it was a friends and family night. So I came away with no 4-pack, which kind of upset me. Anyway, I'm drinking a Anchor Porter because I was like, okay, I want a dark roasty beer. So I'm drinking that and excited for our last episode of the year.
One of our more recent trips to the Civil West Palm location, my wife got the black IPA there, and that was very tasty there as well.
Well done.
Last time that I went there, they had a dark mild on tap, and I had a few of those. Fucking great.
Was it the dark lager, dark mild?
No, dark mild. It's called
okay.
Pub Sauce.
Okay, yeah,
like 4.5% dark mild. Just it was perfect on a cool day to have there, and I can't wait to go up and visit Brad's new concept there. Looking
Pizza's
forward
killer,
to it
man. He went to Pizza University in New York, literally learned how to make dough. And
is it accredited?
It is
or is
not
it like
accredited.
Trump University type of thing?
It's been highly contested. There's a lot of lawsuits going on, but they make good pizza up there and they teach you how to make good dough. But anyway, Brad, as you know, and anyone who's ever had Grace's Fine Foods, one of the best chefs down here. So him going into pizza for a great brewery in the area, it's a match made in heaven.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to that. I am having some celebration. Finally, last weekend picked up my first 6-pack, and god damn, it's funny too. I was sipping one while we were watching TV one night after putting the boys down, and my wife grabs my can and takes a sip, and she's like, "That's such a good beer." I'm like, "Yes, it is."
See,
I also have a little bit of Smooth Ambler Contradiction bourbon. I've had Smooth Ambler stuff before, but it's been many, many years. And this was on sale at the ABC by my house. So I figured I was like, I'll give it a whirl. Really, really smooth. Nice bourbon.
I am glad that you said that it was Smooth Ambler Contradiction bourbon, because when you
Yeah.
you didn't say bourbon, you took the pause there, and I thought maybe it was like a new fragrance. I thought that
It
it was a
is.
new maybe a boy band that has recently come out of Korea. There was a very ornate name.
It can definitely be used as a fragrance. You put a little bit behind your ear, and I hear that 60% of the time it increases your chances of getting a DUI 100% of the time. So
Well done.
with that, we wanted to talk today. Like, we wanted to do business as usual, not do like an end of the year thing, even though like this is our last episode of the year. But let's talk about the things that we talk about normally. And Kevin did a good job of pointing out that we did an episode on distribution a long, long time ago. You said 2020 it was?
Yeah.
So that was like less than a year into us restarting this in the pandemic, probably at that point. And we were talking about distribution, and distribution is such a different game today than it was then. And then it was a much different game than when we all first got into it. This is an aspect, I think, of the industry that is constantly changing and evolving, and always has who they always like to refer to as the suppliers on our toes or on our heels, trying to figure out what the hell is going on. So let's talk about distribution, and all of that fun stuff.
February 6th, 2020.
Okay, so right before the world changed forever. So
And
distribution changed like literally a month and a half after we put out that episode.
And there's still changes, right?
Yeah.
Like they are lasting repercussions for our industry in that way. So one of the things that I am the other aspect of when I was texting you about this topic is that we do, on a baseline, we're kind of always talking about distribution when we're talking about what the market wants and getting beer into Publix and grocery chains. Like, that's all distribution kind of stuff. But there's a real change that I'm seeing, and this might be the experience from breweries outside of our state that they've experienced for 6 years, but I've only been experiencing it for 2 or 3. But there's been a real sea change in the amount of straight craft distributors that have real reach and real market penetration, as we've seen more and more consolidation and more of these smaller distributors selling off to the macro distributors, the Bud and Miller houses, and more of the mid-sized to small craft distributors getting pushed out of the market to the point that they're almost irrelevant because they don't have the kind of ability to get you into the bigger chain, so they can only service smaller breweries that have not as much, that are not looking at the growth potential to be 4, 5, 6, 7,000 barrel breweries. They can service a 500 to 1,000 barrel brewery. So that's been my experience in Florida. And then also I wanted later on talk a little bit about what out of state distribution looks like, with a lot of people that were headhunting beers to try to get new stuff in their area, and then they just kind of forget about you because now you're not the new kid on the block. They can't push you into bars and restaurants as easily. And then all of a sudden you're calling up going, "Hey, you guys haven't ordered in a year. What's going on?" And they won't even return your phone call. And I have a lot of experience with that. So, Mike, what have been your thoughts for your side of, what you've been doing at Copper Point, what you've been seeing for you over the years? Because you've worked with many different distributors. I think your rights were sold or moved around recently. I mean, how has that affected you?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, I have dealt with a number of different distributors just from working for a few different breweries. Um, when at my first brewery, we had one main brewery for South Florida, Brown Distributing, who happened to be a Budweiser house in our home territory, but was a craft distributor through the rest of the entire state at that point, but slowly sold off those territories to other Bud houses, Miller houses, and whatnot. And then eventually, a year or two ago, I think a couple of years now, sold off even their home AB territory to a distributor who we are now a part of, Southern Eagle Distributing, who bought our rights in their territory, which is like Palm Beach County and all of the Treasure Coast. Um, I want to go back to something that you said early on, and I don't know if you saw. I pointed to my nose because I felt like I was like, yes, that is something that I wanted to mention very much. Is we had so many smaller craft centric or boutique distributors, if you will, back in the day, and back in the days like 10 years ago. Um, but I think as craft beer grew and ambitions of those breweries grew, um, those distributors couldn't help so much anymore because they were all about getting you into smaller places, like your really craft centric, high end places. They weren't built for getting you placements in Publix or other chain accounts that they would have to service multiple times a week. They just didn't have the staff for something like that. I remember when I was at my first brewery having a meeting with one of these smaller craft distributors about getting on with them on like West Coast side of the state. And the general manager for them said, "Yeah, we have some people over there. They're not really keen on cold calling places." Like, one, I can't believe that you actually admitted that to us. And it's like, yeah, you're probably not going to help us in the long run. And strangely, that distributor is still around, but they are kind of a shadow of what they used to be. And we've seen a lot of small boutique distributors close. Your Micromans, who used to carry a wonderful assortment of craft breweries like Great Divide. I remember they were the distributor for, and so many others.
So many imports, so much
Yeah,
of the Belgian portfolio. Yeah.
yeah. I think they might have even been the Merchant of Inn distributor at one point, but now if you are a brewery who is trying to move considerable product, you need to be with one of the big houses. You need to in the areas. You need to be with an AB house or a Miller house because they have the infrastructure and they have the staff to be able to move your product. If you're not looking to do stuff like that, there are still small options. And I'm speaking from a Florida standpoint. I don't know what other places are like, but I'm sure that there's some comparison. Those smaller guys, they'll get you into the brass taps, and they'll get you into the world of beers and other smaller placements. And if that's good for you, awesome. But the big boys are the ones who you need to service grocery stores, to service big chain accounts, and that can help you get your foot in the door with some of those places. But they might not want you, and they might not be able to help you all that much. I mean, there were a time when big houses were snatching up craft brands left and right, locals, because they're like, oh, this could be the next one for us. And now a bunch of them are just dropping them off, selling them to other distributors. It's tough out there.
Well, I'd like to talk about those smaller distributors a little bit because I think one of the reasons that you saw Brown do what they did, and listen, I am not doubting the profitability or the business that Brown did. They built a business, they sold it off for millions and millions of dollars. I'm sure they did very well for themselves. But when I got the impression from working from that company that the craft side of things wasn't very profitable. And it was really the bud part of their portfolio that really moved their numbers. And I don't doubt that they made money off those portfolios to a certain degree, but the margins were more difficult for them. It was harder to get all those placements. It was always more difficult to deal with craft centric places because they are always rotating. They need a lot more hand holding. They need a lot more contacts, which means more reps. And I look at what Gold Coast does now is they try to move as much stuff onto their portal for orders as possible. They want to do orders every other week for smaller accounts. This is not something that Brown would do. They would service an account every week, and that's expensive. So I think that they were around in a time where that kind of business, and I'm even talking, and by the way, Brown Distributing in South Florida carried Dogfish Head, right? Carried Founders, carried big national brands that moved a lot of volume in grocery stores. But I still think that they didn't make as much money off that product as they ever wanted to. And they were able to build the business up in enough places where they could sell it off for a pretty penny. But then from my interpretation from all the distributors that I was sold off to and people I've talked to is that no one feels that they got a good return on that investment because they were buying these craft brands thinking they would grow them. And I think they found out there wasn't much growth potential in them. They were already kind of in the places they were going to be in. And if you needed to make a 15% growth or even a 5% growth over last year, you weren't going to find it because by that time, people were moving on to new brands that were more exciting and more niche. And because the craft nerds had moved on from them, and it was fighting uphill to keep those other legacy brands in the stores because they were struggling. So I think that they were kind of I think they were on the good side for themselves of when they sold off, kind of when they got into craft, how they grew with craft, and how they divested from craft, I should say. And I think the industry, and once again, I know this is very Florida centric, and I don't want to speak for anything else the rest of the country.
By the way, Brown still is in operation in Virginia.
Oh yes, that's a good point. Obviously they're doing something up there. I don't know if they have the bud. They have how much bud they have up there.
They are a bud house there.
Is for their whole footprint, right?
Up in Virginia. As far as I am aware, yes.
I think so, yeah. But kind of what I'm getting at is that this is a little bit of Florida, kind of inside baseball, but the industry, we were thinking many years ago, who's the next, because Brown bought Fresh Beer. It was Fresh Beer and Microman were the two big craft beer. If you were a craft brewery in South Florida, or if you were looking to get into South Florida as a craft brewery from outside the state, Fresh Beer, Microman, that's where you'd go because that's where you get the attention from a non-bud house. Brown bought Fresh Beer and Microman dissolved or whatever had happened to Microman. We were always waiting, who's the next one to step up to be that mid-tier service, maybe the whole state or even like the large areas where most of the beer is sold, and they're going to step in and be the next wave of like the new specialty craft from out of state, pick up a bunch of up and coming locals and pick them up and make them something. And part of me is like, oh, no one stepped up to do it. A bunch of people have tried. It hasn't worked. Either the beers aren't available to make those portfolios or the infrastructure is not available to push that beer into the market because it's already saturated. I don't know if it's possible. I think we're going back to a time that probably was in like the 80s and 90s when there was no opportunity for a small distributor to do anything. And it was just macros. And we're reverting back to the time. If we're in the big crunch period, before maybe we have another big bang and things loosen up and give opportunities to other people. But that's kind of been my perspective of it, how I've seen it.
Yeah, I think some of it was right place, right time. Um, but yeah, there there's one distributor in the state who I think did an okay job at filling that middle tier for a bit, but just hasn't really lived up to those expectations. I'm not going to name names because they're still actually in business. Um, but yeah, there's still probably like 3 to 5 small craft centric distributors in South Florida alone who pick up a brand here and there, or are just the smallest of the small, who only distribute maybe like a pallet of kegs a month. And I do think that there's something to be said for those people who do that for those types of small breweries. But I mean, man, it is such a high overhead for such a small amount of business. Like you you got to find all of the uh right points of how that can work out for you to sustain a business that you're enjoying doing. You're moving small products to small accounts, but it can keep your lights on as well.
You point out that there are several craft distributors in Florida, and I mean, no disrespect to them when we're talking about the fact that there's no one filling that mid-level tier. To their credit, one I can think of definitely fills the mid-level tier, but I don't know how effective they can be in growing a brand. And for some of the smaller level ones, or wherever they consider themselves to be, they may have very successful business models. They may be helping their breweries extremely well. I'm speaking from the perspective of a brewery that's in the 3,000 barrel range and needs to grow, needs to get to 4,500, needs to get to 5,000, has uh, goals of having total market penetration for grocery in South Florida. That's one of my major goals. And there really isn't, there are distributors that service those accounts, but those distributors have a hard time being present enough in those accounts to keep those SKUs active and on the shelves and cold every day. And
Yeah.
that's really one of the problems, is that when you work with a distributor like we do with Gold Coast, they have people walking into those public stores multiple times a week.
Hmm.
And there are other ones where they service that account, but they might not be there for 2 weeks. And in that time, your space has been stolen. Someone else has put their 6-pack in there. You haven't been stocked up on the shelves, and you have a hard time keeping your SKUs in there. So
So,
that's the game that gets played, unfortunately, when you don't have the boots on the ground.
but such a strange aspect to this is like that. I think a lot of consumers do not realize is how much the beer section in grocery and even in liquor stores in general is managed and merchandised by suppliers or distributors, not by the stores themselves. You walk into Publix and you walk down almost any aisle during the middle of the day and you see Publix employees stocking shelves. You go over to the beer section, you will almost never see a Publix employee touching beer because distributors merchandise all of that section. And and Kevin's right. Like you have the big boys who have a specific merchandiser who might rotate on, it might go to like 5 stores a day every 2 days or so, every 3 days. So they're hitting those same stores multiple times a week, making sure that their products are stocked and facing forward. And hey, you know what? Such and such brand from that little guy isn't on the shelf right now. It ran out, but I see it in the back here. I'm just gonna take some of that space as well. It's a fucking game that that Publix just like is like you guys can have at it on that section. We'll manage the rest of the store and make sure that everything's in the right spot. But beer distributors, you handle all of this. I mean, the same thing happens in all of the big box stores. All the distributors or the suppliers have to go in and merchandise their own stuff in there.
Th-
It's
There's a reason why every time so before my son came along, I used to do a lot of tastings. And I mean, there was a time in my life where I worked 7 days a week. I did a tasting every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And this was in ABC Liquors, this was in Crown Liquors, but the major one was Total Wine and More. That's where we moved the most of our product. And I'm wearing a brewery shirt. I can't think off the top of my head what a Total Wine and More shirt looks like. I know they've probably changed over the years, but I have never worn in a Total Wine and More the same color shirt or the same outfit, uniform, whatever you want to call it, of a Total Wine and More employee. But inevitably, everyone thought I worked there because I was the one pulling out the ladders. I was the one pulling stuff off the shelves. I was the one merchandising. And it's the same thing. I see this because I go to my local Total Wine is in Boca is kind of my store. That's where I go get all my Old Favorite Friday beers. They have the biggest selection, so I'm going to go there to try to find my beers, right? I respect all the stores. I'm happy that every Whole Foods and everything carries our beer, but Total Wine is kind of my go-to for that because the selection is so much higher. Every time I am there is someone from one of the distributors stocking the shelves. Every single time. And without fail, I will see that person answer 3 questions for customers trying to find specific beers. Because the assumption is someone stocking a shelf must work there. They have no idea that they work for Cavalier Distributing or Gold Coast Distributing or Eagle Distributing brands. They don't know. How would they know? And that's the thing, is that it's the wild, wild west in a very real way. You have people. I was in a store. I don't know if I talked about this in the podcast, but I was in a store maybe 2-3 months ago, and I walk out. I walk in to the cooler section of Total Wine, and one of my beers, 4 packs, had been taken out of the cooler. They were still cold, right? They had just started to condensate, so it just happened, and they were just stacked randomly on another beer's stacker, just on an end cap. And another beer was in the place of one of my beers that had been on that shelf space for like 5 years. And I looked at this beer, and my tag had been pulled, and there was no tag to replace that tag because they would have had to go to the one of the store managers or someone to get a tag placed. And I know what distributor it was because I know the brand. I know who the distributor was. I know that one distributor guy was in the store. So I meticulously pulled every one of the 4 6-packs out. I had them all in my hands. I walked by the person. I made as much noise as I could as I put them in the dry shelf where they're supposed to go. Walked back, stacked all my beer up, went and got a tag for my beer, put it back in the cooler, and walked by and said, "So are you the guy that pulled all my beer out of the cooler?" Oh, no, I love your brand. It's great. It's a good beer. Yeah, it was the other guy. He's new. He didn't know. You had a person trying to steal my shelf space. Now, I'll be honest with you. I don't know about the planograms in Total Wine these days. Maybe that's not a planogram spot. And a planogram is just a diagram that says where the beer is supposed to be. Maybe it was up for grabs. Maybe the store manager or whoever would not have cared if you did that. But that is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with distributors and breweries that have to go in and literally pull beer off the shelf and throw other beers on there to try to make a living.
This is a Mitch Hedberg joke where he talks about like, oh, my first album, I had to take it in and just leave it in stores. Like, no. Please leave
Please
that.
sell it.
Please alphabetize it.
Alphabetize it. That's what it is. But that's the thing. And when that is happening, what I just described, many of us don't see it. It was the perfect timing to see it happen. But it happens every day.
And essentially, stores don't give a fuck.
They don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I mean, the times that you find your beer in random places all over the place, 6-packs are destroyed. It is the wild, wild west. And the ones with the most boots in the ground, the most employees and most merchandisers, they win. And they win in the long term. Mm-hmm. And now that we have had such consolidation where Brown Distributing sold off, and they had a big team, not as big as Gold Coast does, but a big team and a lot of dedication to craft. And when those people start to fall, it puts so much pressure on the smaller guys. And I wonder how long it's going to be until we can see a real resurgence of that, if ever. I mean, I don't want to be too much of a Debbie Downer on that. I mean, I think that there is an ebb and flow to this industry, but it has been a big sea change in the industry.
I don't. I agree that there's probably an ebb and flow with this. I don't want to be all doom and gloom. I know that that's usually my MO on this show, but believe it or not, I actually do really love this industry at its core, and
Not.
and I would like to stay gainfully employed in this industry for a long time. If that's not able to happen, so be it. But I don't think we're ever going to see the years of like your 2011 through like 2016, that 5-year period where things were just booming and going crazy. I don't think we're ever going to see that again. And probably rightfully so. But I do think that we will level out the loss, and smarter people will open up new breweries who will start at a smaller size, understand growth, and know where they want to be. And I think that that's a super important thing.
That's everything.
I don't know. I am so baffled by the amount of brewery owners who I have talked to over the last 10 years who have zero idea on what size they want to be, like what their goal growth is. Like, I don't know how anyone can try to help you if you don't know what you're trying to attain, even if that goal is crazy and non-sustainable. To have no goal is nuts. But I digress.
I do have a point on that.
I think that there will be a spot for the small distributor again at some point that is good for them, but the distributor and the breweries who work with those distributors all need to be able to admit that they know a brewery who signs with them should be like, look, we're only looking at moving this much. We're not going to really grow a whole lot. We just want to have, hey, let's have 20 accounts and let's maintain those accounts. And the distributor should be like, we don't have any contacts with major grocery chains. We're not going to be able to get you in the store to get you meetings with them. We're not going to be able to service them. So as long as you're good with that, we're good here. Mutual agreements, like actual mutual partnerships, which a lot of distributors like to throw out there as a thing, but there's so much, what can you do for us? I think that there will be a place for it, as long as they are aware that they're not going to be a Bud House size thing, and that the breweries understand we're not going to be a fucking Dogfish Head thing.
I just wanted the pin that I dropped a few seconds ago. So I mentioned my brother-in-law who is working for civil society and creating this great pizza menu there. He had a restaurant for a while. He actually had it in a food hall first, but then in a
I worked there.
Yes, yes, you did. You worked there, Mike. So I'm not describing. By the way, I'm not describing it to you. I'm describing it to the listeners.
I just wanted people to say to know that I was a
Yes.
cook for
Yeah.
Brad.
Yeah.
At one
So,
point.
but the important thing is that he then had his own independent place, Grace's Fine Foods. Can you imagine if he was looking to maybe get investors, and they said to him, "So, what do you want to do? What do you want to be?" Well, I'm not sure. I'm either going to be one independent location that needs to gross anywhere from $1 to $1.5 million a year, or I'm going to be a chain of 137 locations with a distribution hub in Chicago, New York, and California, with some international chains in the future. They'd say, "What the fuck are you talking about? That you don't know? Those are very different things." It's not that crazy and different to say, I'm either going to just do 95% of my sales out of the tap room and do 1,000 barrels a year, or maybe 10,000. I'm not sure. Well, one of those two, either an order of magnitude, one way or another, will just be basically the same thing. We'll just kind of see what happens. It's crazy in the restaurant industry. It's crazy in the brewing industry. Just saying. One other thing I want to mention, Mike, and I liked your utopian idea of everyone coming to this with open eyes and saying what they actually want and what they can actually do. And I would say also on the larger distributor side is someone saying, "Hey, listen, we'll be honest with you. You're going to utilize our distribution networks, basically our infrastructure, our trucks, our reps, what have you. But I'll be honest with you. We got a huge portfolio. We're never really going to focus on you unless you do incentives. And we're basically just going to deliver the beer. You're going to have to do everything else, but then we're going to deliver it. And then if you get permanent placements and start to grow with us, you'll become more prominent. Like, oh, hey, they're doing some things. And then you'll start to get some more momentum. But until you reach that tier, you're essentially going to have to do 95% of the work to get these sales done. And then we're going to do the rest. We're a logistics company. We're not really a sales company. I don't think any distributor's ever said that to anybody because that doesn't sound good. But that's realistic when it comes to the big boys, in my experience.
And I think even more so over the last 3 to 4 years, it is.
As brands have grown and everything.
I mean, I am not with the Gold Coast, but I have heard from people who deal with Gold Coast, and even we had a few sales reps of theirs who would come in regularly and drink. They said, yeah, we're a logistics company. We tell people we are a logistics company. Like, we're not a beer sales rep company anymore. Like, this is, and I would like it if there was more transparency from distributors with things like that. There's so much smoke that gets blown up the asses of breweries, and fucking call them breweries. Stop fucking calling them suppliers. We're not water companies. We're not fucking wineries. We're not distilleries. Call us by what we actually are. We're a fucking brewery. And call your distilleries distilleries. How about that? For a little bit of just fucking respect, distributors. Like, I'm going off on a little rant here.
Odd hill to die on.
It really is. It really is. But it fucking caught my nerve just now. Talk about a partnership. So much. I don't know how everyone does it, but I mean, almost every distributor that I've ever personally dealt with wants to preach partnership. And you know what? One simple little thing that you could do to show partnership is to call a business what it actually is, and stop just applying a generic term like supplier to them. Like, we are a brewery. We brew beer. A distillery distills spirits. Wineries make wine. I almost said wineries make wineries. I mean, they do, but
sometimes they multiply.
There could be a little bit more respect towards your brands and then just making them feel like they are a digit in the matrix. And I think it could start with something it's really as simple as that.
Your argument on this is very similar to Paul Farnsworth many years ago yelled at me for calling beer liquid.
I know, like I know people who hate that too. Yeah.
So I just, that reminded me, I had to throw that out there. I do want to mention, and I was talking about my experience with big distributors, and you mentioned Gold Coast specifically, and I've mentioned Gold Coast as my distributor. I do want to mention this, and I think I said this in like Regulation or one of the recent shows. I have a great relationship with our distributor. I do feel like the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis are really great. They do look out for our brand. They are honest on what they will do and what they won't do, and what our responsibilities are versus theirs. I feel like there is transparency that has developed with that relationship, maybe even more so than Brown. I had great personal relationships with the people that I worked with there, but I did feel that there was a lot of smoke and mirrors and a lot of double talk and a lot of, "Oh, we're focusing on you." But okay, what does that mean? Can you describe what that means? And then you just go, "Oh, look, there's a pretty bird over here. There's a pretty bird." What were we talking about? I can't remember. There was a good amount of that too. So it happens all across the industry. It happens because the necessity for these distributors is to have 10,000 brands. They're taking a shotgun approach when it comes to anything below their 80-20 rule, right? Their top 20 accounts, top 20 uh, um, uh, breweries, to make sure that I use that term right, or Mike will get mad at me too. When it comes to that 80% underneath, they're taking a shotgun approach. They're hoping that one or two of those will flesh out and move to that upper tier to replace one that either gets bigger or gets sold, or flocculates down to the lower tier because the
Ooh,
natural
good
cyclical nature.
brewery analogy there.
I'm a
Like
wordsmith, Mike.
actual fermentation analogy.
I'm a
Uh,
wordsmith, Mike. But
uh,
that's the way they attack these things. So I have no ill will towards many of these people and their business practices. I think there could be more transparency, and uh, I I I'm fine with the relationships as they exist, and I'm even fine with where the industry is going, but only for my brand, because I see the position that we have in that distributor and how I have an avenue forward. So maybe it's just selfish for me that I'm not thinking about the guy behind me.
Look, I'm in agreement with you from at least like the similar aspects with our current hometown distributor, Southern Eagle, is they've been very honest, and I feel like a lot of distributors, at least those bigger boys, are starting to be a little more honest and open about things because they may have been burnt by some craft brands, and like they have told us plenty of times of what they can and cannot do. I've learned stuff even from legalities because like they've told us like, hey, we'll co-opt on like ad campaigns with you uh if you want to. And I'm like, oh, okay, sweet. And I came up with an idea for an ad campaign, and they're like, oh, we can't get involved on that type because I want just opening this up. It's not a fucking trade secret, but I wanted to have a couple ads that were geared specifically towards chain accounts and target locations, like zip codes where locations of those chains were at. And they're like, yeah, we cannot back ads for specific accounts because it shows like that we're giving priority
Preference,
to, yeah,
yeah,
preference.
preference,
There we go.
favoritism,
That's
yeah.
the word I meant.
I got you.
And I was like, oh, and they were saying how legally they can't do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. I've learned something new here. I really appreciate that. And I mean, they can be frustrating as all hell with a lot of things. Like they were always asking about or just like, hey, we don't get tap sticker designs for this. Like it's on our website in the distributor section that we have, brand resource section that we have specifically for you. Oh yeah, forgot about that. Like there you go. Like there's sometimes still those little things that we got to push them on, but man, like I've super appreciated our liaison, our brand coordinator or whatever. I don't really
Liaison.
remember what uh, but liaison's a good word. You got to admit
Great
that.
word. Just work that
That's
into every conversation from
that's
now
a
on.
that's a $15 word.
Maybe 1650.
I'll go up to 17. But
Sold.
I do appreciate them being a little more honest with you. Like I like that they're turning down brands. They're saying no, we're not going to take you on because we want someone who we can help service into larger accounts that are going to keep on buying in stuff. And yeah, they should have, every distributor from the start should have told breweries like, hey, you're going to have to do legwork on your own too in a lot of these instances. We're here to help you and support you in these ways of being your logistics company. We are your delivery people. We can help you get in the door of some of these places because we have key account managers for these chains and things. And and yeah, you throw an incentive at the salespeople, we're going to push you. But, and by the way, I know that kind of can sound like a pay for play type of thing, but sometimes all they want is just like shirts or merch for some of their reps. But like doing QDs, quantity discounts, things like that, distributors like because it helps them push your stuff a little more out there. But that does involve you eating some costs on things. Breweries have to put forth some effort when dealing with distributors, and that's a thing that I've definitely learned a lot over time. I was in the, I won't admit when I'm wrong. I was in that playground of like, you need to fucking sell our beer. That's what you're legally here because you have to do this, so you should do it. Look, I still kind of think that they should because that's what it legally says, but I understand the game that we're in now, and we're going to play that game, okay? Triple H taught me that I got to play the game and all of that. But yeah, I'm kind of happy with where distribution has gotten to with breweries. Like I feel fucking terrible saying this because I've always been a hard nose on distributors, but I think that it's better than it used to be when there were a lot more smaller guys who were taking on people with big ambitions and the big guys taking on smaller guys with it. Just I like that it's a little more condensed now and a little more easy in the market because of less distributors and less breweries. But I think that as the dust settles, we'll have a few more smaller guys, boutique guys dealing with smaller guy, boutique guy breweries out there. Yeah, people. Sorry. Okay.
No, I was just saying because you said guys multiple times. I was making fun of that, not your assertion that they're male. That was not where I was going with that, Mike. Sorry.
I babbled. I was babbling there at the end. I was just like trying to find a way. Like, how can I get out of this?
How do I get out of this? How do I just at some point go, Kevin, go? All I was going to say is look at the lacing on that, Mike. Look at that beautiful lacing.
That's a lost art.
Yeah,
I feel like
that's Ralph making a great IPA. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was out of state distro. I know we're probably I can't remember exactly when we started this or exactly how long we've gone. So I know we probably don't want to have a long conversation about it. Am I making a good assertion there, Mike?
Sure. I don't give a fuck.
Well, I'm just saying I don't want to go into a big tirade about it, but one of the things about out of state distro is that by necessity you can't do any work. There are very few breweries, unless you're Dogfish Head, unless you're Sam Adams, unless you're a big boy going into a state for the first time for whatever reason you haven't been in Montana. You don't go into a state with a sales rep. Breweries, let me reframe that. My brewery doesn't go into another state with a sales rep. There's no possible way. We cannot sell enough beer to justify that sales rep.
So I would say not more than 95% of breweries can't.
I know. I just want to make sure that someone's like, "Whoa, my brewery did." Okay, fine. But what I'm saying is that when other people are propositioning us, "Hey, we'd love to have your brand. We've been looking for Florida brands." I've heard that a million times. I don't know what that means or why you'd want that, but we're looking for Florida brands. We like Belgians. We like what you do. We've been on your website. It's all self-serving, nonsense. But they say that, and I was always very transparent. We will probably never visit your area. No one from Barrel of Monks will ever do a sales call in your state, in your territory to try to sell beer for you. Now, if we end up with a relationship where you're doing monthly pickups of a decent amount, we may make a priority to make a once a year visit to your area if I can justify the cost, because it's a cost benefit analysis, right? I'll do the math. And if it makes sense to do that and we can actually grow sales and we can grow together, then I can do that for you. And to their credit, every distributor I've worked with, and I've worked with distributors in over 10 states for both Barrel of Monks and Odd Breed, have all been really cool, good people, mostly with smaller boutique distributors. And also, to their credit, mostly people who did not sign me up for a contract that said that they own my rights in perpetuity and could sell me off to anybody else. These were people that said, if this is not working out, we can dissolve the contract, what have you. I have a great deal of respect for every one of those distributors and all those people. What bothers me is that so many of them were just getting as many brands as they could with the idea that new beer would mean that they can go to those bottle shops, those bars that wanted to rotate and go, I got this new thing from Florida and it's a Imperial Stout or it's a Belgian double or whatever they wanted, and get that kind of adrenaline hit of the new beer, and then they never buy it again. Because why would they? They're on to the next thing. And they were building up these portfolios of all these beers because that's how they were doing their business and how they were growing, but it wasn't sustainable. And now, 3-4 years later, they won't return my emails when I say, hey, I've got an inventory right now. If you're interested, let me know. I would appreciate, hey, listen, your beer didn't sell very well. I'd appreciate that. Hey, your beer sold just fine, but we're not bringing any more out-of-state stuff. Or just not really interested in your brand. Some kind of communication from someone that I signed a contract with that says like, hey, I'm just not interested. Hey, it's not you, it's me. Right? I'd appreciate that. But radio silence, especially with one of our brands in Odd Breed, that really requires selling to a lot of different states because of the nature of the business and the stylistic nature of what Odd Breed does. And they just fall off the face of the earth. And I know they're still in business, but they won't return an email or they won't follow up with you. And that's the thing where you have like people in these smaller companies that I have only experienced from afar that I'm like, man, your eyes were too big for your stomach. You just brought in all these brands and you got people excited about things. And for the most part, you tempered expectations, but you got to be a good partner and actually communicate. Because if you were to say, hey, listen, didn't work out for us, there's other distributors in this area, maybe you should talk to them. Maybe we'd be a year ahead of where we are now and trying to find somebody else because we've already sold some beer in the market. So maybe we could continue doing that business. Not every brewery should be doing this and going outside the state. I'm not even suggesting that our beer should Odd Breed or Barrel of Monks should have caught on like wildfire in freaking Timbuktu. I'm just saying is that the nature of I need to grab as much as possible is one of the things that is dragging down that kind of distributor.
Oh man, I want to tell a story now. Because I've only had one experience with out of state sales. I've actually done more international sales than I have out of state, like in the country. At my first brewery, we were at GABF one year, and a couple guys came up to our booth, had some beers, and I noticed their name tags because they had industry badges, and they were from a distributor in Philly who I recognized because I stayed very, very active on what was going on in Philly's beer scene because hey, in case you didn't know, I'm a Philly dude. Um, so I was like, oh, hey, and I knew them as being the indie uh, craft distributor in the city. It's like, hey, my name's Mike. Nice to meet you. I'm from the Philly area myself. I know all about you. I should have said, I know all about yous. And we struck up a conversation, and uh, I was actually planning on going and visiting some family like a couple months later, and they're like, "Hey, come by the operation," because they were also a in Philly or in Pennsylvania, laws on beer is interesting, but they're what is called a distributor in Pennsylvania. A beer distributor there is essentially a beer store where you can go and buy beer. But up until very recently, you could only buy a case at a time. Like you couldn't buy a six pack, you couldn't buy individual bottles, but a lot of that had changed. So they were a family, long time run um, beer distributor store in the city, and then turned into a wholesaler, as they like to call distributors up there. They call them wholesalers. Game for craft in the Philly area. So I went up and I talked with them about doing Philly Beer Week. This was like a fucking my eyes lit up, and I'm like, holy shit, that's it's a big deal in Philly beer to be a part of Philly Beer Week. And
Them
they're like,
wolves.
yeah. Well, that wasn't during Philly Beer Week.
I know, but still.
That was CBC. But
Sorry, I had to thought of that.
we'll our little thing. So like I talked with the guys that I met and the owner of the company and talked about doing some events for Philly Beer Week, and it's like, oh sweet, that would be awesome. They were also at the time the distributor for Cigar City in Philly. Cigar City didn't at that time distribute a whole lot outside of Florida, but Philly was one of the areas they were at. They distributed them, and they're like, we love them, and we had a good relationship with Cigar City, and they kind of like vouched for us, and we did an event together. They hooked us up with some events up there. Really great stuff. We did an event at the beer bar that is like I could walk from the house that I grew up in like 10 minutes to this spot. It is a great craft beer bar called the Humeville Inn in Pennsylvania. We did a dual tap takeover with Cigar City. We had a spotlight in the PHS Beer Garden on South Street. It was a great time. And then after that, they invited us to like, hey, we would love it if you could send us beer regularly, and we'd love to distribute your stuff here. And like, we never really thought of distributing outside of the state. And after some talking and some negotiating, we decided to sign a contract with them to send them beer. And their first order was like a pallet of cans, 100 cases of mix and match stuff, and like I think it was like 3 pallets of Slims, mix and match stuff on that. And we're like, fucking awesome. And like that first run of stuff like went mostly like gone pretty quickly. And then it like, all right, month and a half later, they reordered some stuff. Then it slowed down, and then it kept on slowing down. And like we got around to like fall time, like, hey, we got Oktoberfest, we got pumpkin beers. You guys want to order? They ordered 100 cases of pumpkin beer, and we're like, shit, okay, you want this? And 40 Slims, that's 2 pallets of Slims. Like, all right, we sent it to them. Checking that inventory, almost nothing moving. Like, you guys ordered this. We didn't tell you to order this. And it's not moving, not moving. Like, all right, This is we never got an order from them again. They sold their distribution wholesale partnership to one of the big houses eventually, and we were just like, yeah, we're not gonna sign that. We're not gonna agree to that because I guess we had to sign in order to say that we were going to them. We're like, we're just done here. It was one of these very romantic things to me to have my beer distributed in my home area, but it was again smoke was blown up our ass to build their portfolio because they were one of those places that love to have like just a bunch of stuff that they can get into those small little spots. And then they moved on to something else. And then we didn't have anyone there to move it. And that was their thing to us. Like, well, you don't have a rep here. Like, yeah, you knew that we weren't going to have one. And you made big orders. And it's like, what the fuck? But yeah, my fun little story about dealing with out of state distributors. Not as much as what you have. Like you have many compared to that, but yeah.
But without the romanticism, very similar stories. I mean, and once again, I have respect for these people. They bought my beer and they sold it in good faith. And no one ever said, "Hey, take your beer back." No one ever sent me a bill saying we didn't sell your beer. The transaction was valid. I just would appreciate more transparency in what your actual intentions are. If this isn't going well, please let me know. Once again, for Barrel of Monks, it was always added business, right? Oh, wonderful. I can sell an extra, couple hundred barrels to out of state distro this year. Great. That's money in our pockets. That's, we have the capacity to do 4,500 barrels out of our brewery right now, and we're not utilizing it all. So that's good. It's added business. It makes us money. We're happy. But for Odd Breed, it's a necessity. We need to move beer outside of the state because Florida is a wasteland for actual, real, well-made sour beers because everyone does smoothie sours and fake Berliner Weisses. So we need to get out into those markets. So if you sign with someone who does not have an intention to do consistent business with you, you're inhibiting the growth of that brewery and the potential. And maybe there's not even the potential for growth with that brewery. Maybe no distributor would be able to do anything with it. That's a possibility too. But this idea of not returning emails, returning phone calls, that just bites me in the ass.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we had some of those things going on with those guys in Philly. Is they just asking about certain stuff? Like we used to get like a weekly inventory report, and then that stopped coming through at one point after we complained and like, hey, haven't gotten a inventory report on what you have on hand. Yeah, it's childish, dumb shit that could be very, very easily solved by saying those things that you said earlier. Is like, look, yeah, it's just not working. We'll cut you loose. Like instead of looking at a brewery as a commodity, then in that case as like, well, who's going to pay me for your brand? Like just take the L and fucking move on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, listen, and the moral of the story is probably that breweries of the size that we're talking about, which is the brewery that you and I both worked for, and the brewery that I currently own, and one of the breweries I'm currently a partner in now, is maybe we should not be dabbling outside of our own markets. It's probably the real rule. Not that there are not sins on these distributors for distributing us and maybe not being as communicative, but we probably should not be pushing the bounds of that either. Because if we can't sell our beer in our own state, in our own markets, when we're talking about the volumes that we are discussing, probably not a great business model. Right.
Exactly.
If it
Yes.
necessitates going, if you're in Florida and you're like, man, if I can just get to South Carolina and you're doing 2,000 barrels a year, you done fucked up.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. Like having to go to other states to necessitate sales is never a good idea. Uh, growth should be based off of demand, and like it, all of that beer that you're then sending out of state kind of is like you could have sold that nearby if
Or maybe you
you
couldn't have. That's the issue.
yeah, that too. Yeah.
I'm just saying. I mean, listen, it's a competitive market. It's difficult. We're all fighting for every inch. We talked about the pirate wars on the public shelves. It can be difficult out there. So I understand anyone trying to sell those beers out there. We got tons of breweries that are selling packaged beer hand over fist, that are sending multiple pallets to Sweden, right? Like there are opportunities everywhere. But at the end of the day, your long-term stability, your long-term market needs to be in your home market and a natural growth outside of it. I believe, at least that's the historic model. I'm not saying it's not the new model, and I'm not saying it can't change. But if you look at the people who have had actually sustained success for 20 years, 30 years, that's how they've done it. And I think if you're looking for investment strategies, you probably want to follow Warren Buffett more than be whatever that fucking crypto douchebag was. What was his name? He has like the initials for his name.
Oh, the yeah.
You know what
I
I'm
know.
talking about. You know what
Yeah,
I'm talking about. No one else does because I.
Sam Bankman-Fried or
Yes,
something
that's
like
him. Yeah, that guy.
but yeah, I completely am with you on that. Um, I cannot reiterate something like that more. It's just yes, I'm with you. All right. Anything else you want to add into that?
I think we've done it, Mike. I think we had a good
We've
discussion
done
about
it.
distribution. We did it.
We did it.
We could not come
Adrian!
up with we could not come up with a valid end of the year episode, so we lied and said that we came up with a normal episode just to skirt that issue, and we've successfully done it, Mike.
I'm happy with myself.
I know, I'm sorry.
And you too.
You can cut that out, by the way. That really wasn't true, but I wanted to just make that statement.
I won't cut that out. All right. Let's head into last calls, point in the show where we give each other an unspecific amount of time to talk about whatever it is that we want, beverage related, unbeverage related. The only rules are that it is uninterrupted, unopposed, unobjected. Kevin, why don't you start things off for our last calls?
So anyone who is a regular listener of our podcast knows that Mike and I regularly in our last call advocate for important social issues. I mean, I've done myself last calls. I mean, Mike just last week was talking about charitable contributions. I've talked about trans rights. We've talked about all the archaic laws in Florida. So obviously, I for the last thing of the year, our last episode, I want to do something big, something that I was really passionate about, something really, really important. So I wanted to talk about the fact that there is no such thing as a reversible belt. That does not exist. And anyone telling you that a reversible belt is an actual thing is lying to you and trying to steal your money. I don't know if you guys understand the concept of belts. I'm assuming that many of you listening to this have worn one. Many times, different businesses will have a belt that they purport to be reversible. It has a brown side and a black side. A lot of leather is dyed to be either brown or black. It's one of the most popular two colors for a leather belt. And there is this idea that if you just take the belt, the buckle part and reverse it, like you kind of pull it out and you twist it, and then you can like say, oh, now it's black, and then you do it again, it's brown now, and then you do that you could wear this belt because you want to be stylish, you want to be fashionable, you want to like match your belt to your shoes. I've always heard that's a good thing to do. So a lot of people purport to have this. Now, I don't want to brag, but I was shopping at Old Navy very recently because I'm classy, and I bought a new reversible belt. I have a hard time finding belts that work for me that I really like. I keep them for a long time, and then when one breaks or just gets too old, I have to toss it out. So I got a new one, and I bought a reversible one, and I came to understand very, very quickly. Mike is drawing messages on parchment and showing me during this. That counts as interruption, by the way. Um, and I realized very quickly that by the nature of a belt, you need it to kind of contort itself in a circular shape. Like the little tail end of a belt that like after you've pulled it taut needs to kind of curve around and hug your body. And the nature of a reversible belt is that when you've worn a belt in a certain way for a long time, it will curve in that way. And then if you reverse it, then it will like tail off, like it wants to. The other way will want to escape from your body and not contort around your body. And you might say, "Oh, well, belt loops will hold that down." Not necessarily, depending on where the belt loops are. Maybe the belt loops are not in that exact spot. So then you have this like belt where it's like brown is perfect, brown works, it's really great. And then like the black side as it's there will kind of just like kind of tail off like it's like trying to escape your torso. That doesn't work, guys. Doesn't work. So if you're going to buy a reversible belt, please understand that unless you're like reversing it every day, so you're getting like it's really, really worn in and like you're training it. If you're going to use it on one side predominantly, maybe just buy a brown or a black belt. The more you know.
G.I. Joe. That was beautiful. All right. So going second on last calls has come to be like a very unenviable position. So what I wanted to talk about is art a little bit. And as someone who kind of calls himself an artist, it can be tough being an independent person sometimes and trying to get your your art seen by people and potentially bought as a product, whether that be prints or actual paintings or uh, sculptures or whatever it is that you make as your piece of art, because algorithms hate you and they want you to pay for people to see you. Um, and there, but I want you to know that if you feel like it's a tough thing to support artists that you like out there by buying stuff from them because like you don't have enough income. I completely understand that. There are ways that you can help artists that don't involve you actually buying anything from them. You can actually help the algorithm help them by liking their posts, commenting on their posts, and probably one of the biggest things of all is sharing their stuff. You have no idea that there could be as little as one and as many as however many people follow you that could really dig the work of someone that you like and you follow. Sharing an artist work on your social media, whether that just be like in your stories on Instagram, retweeting something, reposting something on Facebook, is absolutely free. You don't have to buy anything, and you are helping an artist get their name out there to more people who may not know who they are. And those people could buy something from them and then share that information to their friends, their followers, and help spread the word. That's how grassroots stuff can really work, even when the algorithm is working against you in general. So, what I say to you is share the work that you really love. Like, it's such a free and fun thing to do, to just like, if you're scrolling through Instagram and you come across something that you really like, you hit that like, but you know what? Hit that share, post it to your stories. Someone might come across your stories and be like, "Whoa, what's that so and so just posted? That's really cool." Oh, they're an artist, they're a photographer, they're a painter, they're an illustrator, they're something like, I'm gonna follow them. Oh, they do this. You know what? I'll buy a print from them. I'll buy this from them. I like that type of stuff is immeasurably helpful to artists and cost absolutely nothing. And you can help artists in that sort of way. So, what I say to you for 2024 is share art, share the artists that you love, and help art stay relevant and important, and help artists stay on their feet. I'm not even saying that you have to like what I do, but you come across someone, especially if they're local, dude, like help your fucking locals out. Like if you follow them and you like their stuff enough, post it. And you like it, post it, share it, do it. Help out your artist that way. That's that's all I want to say. Kevin, anything to plug?
I have no idea when this episode's going to come out. I never know when this episode's going to come out, but we do have a holiday party coming up at Barrel Amongst Brewing here on the, pulling my phone out, on the 16th, actually.
Hey, this episode comes out on the 14th. So
there we go. So if you're hearing
knows?
this in a couple days, we're going to have our Christmas morning, which is our coffee version of Father Christmas, available. All you can drink tickets with a bunch of great beers. Our holiday party is probably our second biggest party of the year, other than our anniversary party. And come on out, see us. We've got some great beers on. We've got some really, really great cans of beer that Ralph just put out, Devil's Decadence and Simulated Summer as well. So yeah, I would absolutely want to plug that. And then just want to say happy holidays to everybody. This is my favorite time of year. It helps that I have a 5-year-old child who loves everything. We just drove around counting the Christmas decorations on each house in our neighborhood and comparing it to the other neighborhoods next to us, and then doing the calculation of how many houses versus how many houses were decorated versus houses that they were in the neighborhood, to see what percentage of houses were decorated in each neighborhood, to see who won. And I know that all sounds like a competition. It was really fun. And like I said, it's my favorite time of year. And I just wish the best to everybody that is listening.
So Jad's going to be an analytics kid. I love this time of year as well. We've made no attempts to hide that. So yes, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Boxing Day, Happy New Year to everyone out there. I am not one of those terrible atheists who wants to take Christ out of Christmas or anything like that and refuses to fucking say Christmas. Are
you asserting that's what I was doing?
No, I'm asserting
sure
that there is this fucking thing that's been going around for, it feels like a decade now, that atheists want to kill Christmas. I fucking love Christmas, and I don't believe in any God or Jesus or any of that.
You're talking to two atheists that fucking love Christmas.
Yeah. So, but to those of you who do not celebrate Christmas, but celebrate a different holiday like the ones that I said before, I wish you a very pleasant holiday and hope that it is filled with joy and family and friends and just a safe and happy time. So yeah, this is going to be our last episode for the year. We will be back in 2024 to talk more beer, talk more beverage industry, and just see where this wacky, wild world that we call beer goes until till we can't do it anymore. um, Other than that, if you want to go and like you want to really help out the show, go check out our website, unitedwedrink.com. Go to the Brands We Love page. There's places doing great sales on stuff, obviously, because it's the holiday season. But if you use those links and then take advantage of those sales, we get a little kickback, and I'll just apply it towards our hosting, and that's all that we care about on that. Other than that, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, be safe out there this holiday season, and we will see you in 2024. Cheers.
Cheers.